on July 6th for the Planning Commission in the City of Solvang. We have the roll call, please.
David Prince. Here. Scott Gold.
I'm here.
Aaron Peterson. Justin Rodriguez.
Present.
And Jack Williams.
Here.
Thanks.
Let's have the Pledge of Allegiance. Scott, would you lead us?
Absolutely. Right hand over your heart. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. On to the business at hand. Public comment.
Do we have public comment on items not on the agenda? We'll take people in person first.
Yes, I have one speaker slip.
Yeah, and I haven't required people to necessarily fill out sticker slips just because we don't have disinfected pens and all that stuff. So if there's anybody else, they can just come up and speak, please.
Rika Rasmussen.
Okay. Hi, my name is Rika Rasmussen. I'm a resident of Solvang, and I'd just like to address and ask you tonight, I'd like to address the idea of the Vets Hall development project. I went to the so-called meeting, the town hall meeting, and they answered questions, but it didn't really answer a lot of questions, and there was a lot of us that walked away wondering. So there's a lot of reasons why people are unhappy with it. I'm not going to go all through all of them because I know you're all aware of it. We all are. My major ones are, as you know, the city council has been in talks with the developer, Ed St. George, to sell the city property and allow him, the developer, to create his vision, not our vision, not the city, not the community's vision or our residents, of what we need as a community. What he pretty much said what he thinks we need, not what we think we need. As was made obvious during the So-Town called meetings, he was pretty unaware of what Solvang, the entire valley, and our neighbors are about and hold important. Another point is Mr. St. George has never really built a project of this size. He's built good-sized apartment buildings, but he's never built a big hotel complex like this. What happens if it doesn't work out for him? Okay, is the city going to absorb the cost? Do we end up holding the bag? Are we going to have a Danish-themed Paseo, abandoned Paseo Nuevo on Mission Drive? And how much is it going to cost the city? No one seems to be able to tell us what it's going to cost. It's not, he won't say what it's going to cost him, and the city council doesn't say what it's going to cost the city of Solvang. The questions about the water and the sewage treatment also don't get answered. As we know, water and sewage are a big deal in this town. In addition, when the city incorporated, $4 million was paid to LAFCO to help create the city. How is the current value of the property going to be dealt with? Is the city council expecting to go in with the developer? Is the developer going to pay the city the current value of the land that he is building his hotel, retail space, and apartments on? And looking at the plans and how the space is used, it seems the focus of the development appears to be the need to mostly benefit Mr. St. George and his ability to profit on his planned hotels, apartments, retail spaces, and parking spaces. So there's many additional, like I said, additional both legal and emotional reasons. And I'm not going to repeat all of them or go into them. It just seems like the project is not really solving. Don't get me wrong. I totally agree with the city council. We need something to improve upon that civic center, or what could be a civic center. I'm old enough and lucky enough to remember when the library was in the Vets Hall, in the Vets building. So it's probably time to change it up again because we have outgrown that library and all the rest of the county buildings there. But we also have people in the valley, in town, and in the valley as well, that would be willing to give their time and talents to creating a community-driven civic center that works for all of us and addresses what we need as people in the valley, not what somebody from out of town thinks we need. A shining example was when we asked him, well, what are you gonna do about the parades? Where do we stage our parades? And he goes, I don't know, you guys will have to figure it out. And it's like, that didn't really go over very well in the meeting. There's got to be a better way to improve upon our community space than selling the land and development rights to someone that does not hold our community's needs and wants first. It's a beautiful space. We all treasure it. Let's improve upon it and not let some out-of-town developer make the decision for us about how we want it used. That's what I have to say tonight. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Chairman Williams, if I could just really quickly address this procedurally, this public comment. I just would like everybody to know that we are very much at the beginning of a conceptual conversation on the project. There's definitely hasn't been any project submitted to the city. That's what we tried to communicate at the regional workshops on June 27th. All of the questions have now been gathered and will actually be answered and posted on the website next week. And we also will be following up with additional smaller version of the workshops to have more of a conversational setting. So I just wanted to address that for anybody that's watching so they know where we are in the process with this.
Do we have anybody else that wants to speak online?
Is there anybody else on items not on the agenda, on Zoom or phone? If you would like to speak on Zoom, please raise your hand, use the raised hand button. Looks like we have no takers.
And then we also have this letter.
Okay, so moving on, any requests for continuance, withdrawals, or additions to next agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move on. Conflicts under ex parte communications, anybody have? Nope. And so let's move on to approval of the minutes from March 2nd. Anybody?
Microphone, hear you.
It's on, yeah. I just turned it on. So, anybody want to make a motion to approve the minutes or have comments on them?
I have no comments. I will make a motion to accept the minutes for the meeting on March 2nd, 2020, as presented.
I'll second.
So, okay, it's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. 4-0, it passes.
Great.
Okay, on to public hearing items. Item A, the capital improvement program. I do have one speaker slip for this from Alvin Sauch. Is that the correct pronunciation? Is he here or online?
He's
here.
So,
Okay, well, I'll wait till he gets here so we can hear it. But thank you. Hmm? No, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, we,
Alvin, we're going to go ahead and do the staff report. You can stay and hear it.
Please stay so you can hear us. And yes, we're more than 6 feet away, so if you want to turn the mask off, you can.
so the presentation will be made by Mark Van Denlen and from the Public Works Department as the manager of the capital improvement plan.
Okay?
Okay, great. Thank you, Lori. So, good evening, Chair Williams and Planning Commissioners. Matt Vanderlinden, your Public Works Director and City Engineer. So, staff recommends that the Planning Commission review the capital improvement program for fiscal year 2021 through fiscal year 29-30 and make a determination of conformity with the city's general plan. So the purpose of this report is to provide the Planning Commission with an overview of the City of Solvang's 10-year capital improvement program. The role of the Planning Commission is is to determine conformity with the city's general plan pursuant to state code. The approval of the specific projects and allocation of funding will be determined by the city council. State code requires a regular programmatic level review of all major public works projects for conformity with the local general plan. So the staff report includes a list of categories of projects and the different projects within the 10-year plan underneath each of those categories. If you'd like, I can go through those. But the main categories are transportation and road improvement projects, and then alternative transportation projects, which are things such as bike lanes, sidewalks for pedestrians, and any transit-related projects. And then the next category is facility and parks projects. And then we have stormwater-related projects, water projects, and sanitary sewer and wastewater treatment plant projects. So I think probably the best way to proceed is if there was any particular project you have interest in, I'd be happy to kind of give a more in-depth explanation of the project or answer any questions that you might have on any of the projects. Again, the city council, it's a little bit unusual. Normally, this meeting would happen before the city council approves the 10-year capital plan. Because of the problem with the noticing, this meeting was, had to be canceled and rescheduled. So the city council's approval of the 10-year plan is contingent upon the planning commission's finding that the capital plan is in conformity with the general plan. So that concludes my staff report. And I'm happy to answer any questions or expand on any projects that you have interest in.
I would like to add one other point to this. In the capital improvement plan, there is a work schedule for updates to the land use element, circulation element, design guidelines, and open space conservation, noise and safety. So there are a number of planning items that will be coming to your planning commission over the course of the next year, updating the housing, also the housing element. So we have some work ahead of us, but it's in the plan and it's proposed to be in the budget for the coming years.
Okay, so,
Mr. Chair, I was just going to note on those items, you may want to consider at some point soon setting a workshop on those items. They are really very much planning items that the Planning Commission would usually provide staff with input on, including looking at how they all fit together. And I think the community would probably appreciate you all having some sort of workshop on that.
Right, and I would just like to add to that as well that we will be proceeding with an RFP and hiring a consultant for the general plan update, and we are hoping to also use that consultant, be that scope of the work to facilitate those larger conversations with the community about development forward, and also help facilitate conversations such as the larger developments that you're hearing about, such as the Vets Hall, for example. So it will all come together.
Yeah,
hopefully.
if I could just add one last thing too, sorry. So I believe you all have received the copy of the letter from Mr. Salji. And I did want to just point out that the Vets Hall project that he's referring to is still within the 10-year capital plan. It's been pushed out because of the uncertainty of whether the project will be needed or the full scope of the project will be needed. But the project is the Veterans Hall ADA and restroom upgrades. So a few years back, the prior city council, there had been a project in the capital plan for many years to upgrade the restrooms at the Vets Hall. So, and I should just maybe give a little background on that. So cities are required to continually be implementing ADA, Americans with Disability Act, accessibility upgrades throughout the city. And in part of doing that, we prepared what was called a transition plan, I'm sorry. And basically, the cost of all the ADA upgrades, if you try to do it in 1 year, it'd be $100 million. So there's no way most cities can handle any kind of big undertaking like that all at once. So the transition plan is what the federal government came up with as a means of allowing cities mostly that have smaller budgets to create a plan to slowly implement these ADA improvements over time. And so in the 10 years I've been here, we've constructed numerous sidewalk access ramps. There's been several that were built many years ago that were not ADA compliant, so there were several locations where there were ramps, and we upgraded them, and then several locations where there were no ramps, and we've added those ramps. And one of the big areas of need for ADA upgrades were the restrooms at the Veterans Hall. So most of the items, there are a few more significant items that were going to require relocating walls and things like that. But most of the deficiencies were minor. So for example, an arm rail was too high, a couple inches too high, or a couple inches too low. The arm rails adjacent to the toilets have to extend out far enough beyond the end of the toilet so someone in a wheelchair can grab onto that and swivel around. So some of them didn't extend out far enough or far enough back. We had some signage that was at the wrong height. Even the signage that a blind person that can read with Braille on the signs, some signs were missing, some signs were at the wrong heights and things like that. So there were quite a few minor things and a couple more significant things. In May of last year, we completed all the architectural plans and specifications for doing this project, this Veterans Hall ADA and restroom upgrades. And at that point, the staff was directed to put the project on hold. And because there wasn't certain, there'd been, even before, Mr. St. George, there were over the years conversations about, possibly using the space there differently. And so the city council directed staff to put the project on hold, don't go out to bid, but it still is in the 10-year plan. So I just wanted to let you know that it is in the plan. It wasn't deleted, it was just, pushed back at this point since the date of, or the full need of doing that project is not, determined yet. So that concludes my staff.
Okay, so are we going to get dinged for not doing what you call these minor things?
Chair Williams, no. So what you have before you tonight is simply a determination of whether the items in the CIP program, in fact, are compliant with the general plan. The timing for those things, and I would note, I think there are some other issues about the timing related to those improvements. Matt described the very minor things, which, as I understand, could go as their own actions. There are also some very significant costs. For example, building shower facilities there, which I think are likely to be reviewed at some point, but have nothing to do with the general plan consistency or any other item related to the potential building which is not on the agenda. If you wanted to have those discussions about the building or broader items, I would urge you to set those for a future agenda item. But again, this evening, all you're looking at is whether the things that are proposed for the next 10 years are consistent with the general plan.
Okay, Mr. Salchi, would you like to speak now?
I'm Alvin Salgi. I'm the Solvang VFW commander of Post 7139. I've been the commander since 2012 for 8 years. And I'm not a Solvang resident, but I lived in the San Ynez Valley for over 21 years. I'm here this evening to elaborate on the letter I provided to all of you today. And I'm glad of the update from Matt. That was great. Appreciate that. And the first thing I want to do, has my letter been read into the record?
It has not.
Mr. Chair, and I think we've created this misunderstanding during the coronavirus period. The letter has been provided to the commission, and that's the form in which it is put into the record, is the physical provision of the letter. So yes, that has occurred.
Okay, thank
So it
you.
will be included as part of the minutes, and yes.
Okay. So to give you some background, 2 years ago, Jeff McKeon, he's the American Legion commander, and I met with Matt and discussed the upgrades in detail. We agreed with them and thought they were great, and even though would have had limited access to the vet halls for 4 months or longer, primarily from January through April of 2020. I didn't know that the upgrades were canceled by the city council until I received a letter from the city in August of 2019 indicating the cancellation with no plans to reschedule the project. That's what the letter said from the rec center. I didn't know it was still in the long-range capital plan. And then I didn't know the why of the cancellation until I had discussions with Matt in May, finding out about St. George's proposal redevelopment plan. And we and the veterans and the San Ynez Valley community still need a hall with ADA improvements, even if Ed's proposal goes forward, because we need them in the interim, because it'll probably be years before Ed's project would even start or be completed. And so we have several veterans that are disabled and would need the restrooms to be upgraded. So the only other comment I have is that we as veterans are against the Solvang 2.0 project. We want to keep the Vets Hall in its current configuration and want the city to comply with our contract for consultation and our approval of anything that happens to the Vets Hall. Any questions for me?
No, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, one thing you could do this evening as an advisory to the city council is ask them to take a look at what Matt called the series of smaller things to make sure that in fact those things that could happen for ADA compliance, like the, moving signs to the proper height or extending
That was where I was going with
things,
my
you could certainly include
original
that as
question
an
on
Extending
advisory.
bars in the stalls and things like that.
Yeah. And my question had to do with, are we going to get dinged by the state or the feds for not doing this, even though we've been told it needs to be done? And, the fact that we say it's going to be done, a year from now or 2 years from now or 10 years from now may not carry a lot of weight.
Sure. That's a really good question. And so the transition plan lays out, a wide variety of projects that the city is going to do to address the ADA deficiencies. So my understanding is as long as we're showing progress, then we're in compliance. So we've been maintaining a spreadsheet with all the different accessibility projects that we've been doing. For example, the doors on this building here at City Hall were replaced, and we have the push button, accessible door here and across the street at the annex. That was a project that was done as well. So we're keeping track of all the different projects we're doing and the amount of money we're spending to bring things in the city to ADA compliance. So if a particular project gets postponed or whatever, that usually won't have a major effect on our progress. We'll continue to make progress in other areas. So that will be in compliance.
Has the minor portion, signage and rails and things like that, has that ever gone to bid? Have we ever gotten a quote to get those fixed?
No, because the reason that wasn't is it was envisioned that we'd have a project where we're going to be completely remodeling the restrooms. And so it didn't make sense to make all these little minor adjustments and pay somebody to do that. And then just tear all that out when we remodel the restrooms. Part of the problem with the restrooms at the Vets Hall is there are too few toilets. So part of the remodeling that was going to take place was going to actually add stalls and toilets and urinals, and the restrooms would be reconfigured and actually slightly enlarged, so it can serve a lot more guests simultaneously.
Sure.
So anyway, so that was the thinking. Whether or not it's, in hindsight, might not have been the best plan, but that was the thought that, don't spend a bunch of money fixing those things when we're going to completely remodel the restrooms. So.
The other question I have regarding this is, today, from what I understand, the signs are at an incorrect height, the bars are at an incorrect length.
Mm-hmm.
Were they in compliance at the time and things have changed, or were they done in error and they've just come to light now?
Yeah, that's a good question also. So all of the ADA transition plan was developed, I believe, in 2011 or 12. So it was since that time these deficiencies have existed. Again, they're most of them considered minor. And we've been doing quite a few other projects at the Vets Hall in these last 10 years. It was about 12 years ago the city did the whole re-roofing project. And then we replaced most of the windows, and we were going to replace the last few windows in the Legion Wing with this ADA restroom upgrade. And then we also upgraded the electrical panel, so we spent quite a bit of money and removed all the old electrical panels and replaced those with, new state-of-the-art code-compliant electrical panels. So that was like a major project. And then we did two different painting projects. One of the painting projects, we removed all the lead-based paint. So that was another big project to remove all that and repaint those areas. And this was going to be the next project. It would have been done by now, had it not been put on hold. And I did want to just clarify also, at least my understanding is that when the project was put on hold, Ed St. George didn't own the property and was not in the picture. That came after, but anyway.
And just to be clear, he does not own the property now.
No,
No, he does
just
not.
owns the Skit lumberyard next to it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would just note, if I recall correctly, the council put the project on hold largely because it was a little over $500,000. And there was a desire to take a look at whether or not some of the components, for example, the adding showers, were things that were worth the cost.
I wonder if we can move where we can fix what needs to be fixed and not,
Yeah.
maybe a two-phased approach instead of adding showers, but at least get to a place where we're in compliance.
Yeah, can we just make a recommendation to the city council to
Sure.
create a mini project, if you will, not something on the scope of what you're talking about, but
Mr. Chair,
our
I
staff could probably do most of this stuff.
Yeah, I don't think it's really part of the 65402C determination, but as an addition, I know the council is always quite happy to hear your comments on things, and so staff could bring that back as comments from you.
Right, I'd appreciate it. I have a couple other things I want to bring up too, but that wasn't one of them. So, David, or?
Just as a point of education, could you explain on the projects, so how it works just in general? So we're actually just measuring conformance with the general plan. Is there a weighting of criteria that in that, or?
Well, yeah, that's a good, again, a good question. So my understanding, and, you know, I've done this several times now with the number of planning commissions, but I've always viewed it and understood it as not so much a looking at each project individually and saying, oh, that's in conformance, but I think if you kind of flip it the other way around and say, is there anything, okay, here's the general plan that's kind of laying out the general direction or whatever for the city. Is there any of these projects that goes way off, you know, out of that, you know, those guardrails or whatever that the general plan has set for projects? So most of the projects are well within that. They're just, most of the projects in the capital plan are maintenance projects. They're existing facilities that we're just maintaining. It's really kind of the new, different projects that that you'd want to focus more on. So in the 10-year plan, we have some studies, and I'm trying to think of anything right now that is really it's different from a maintenance project. And there's very few projects that are not just maintenance projects. So like, for example, a few years back, the city drilled 2 new wells a few years ago. So that would have been a project where the planning commission would say, okay, that's something totally new. You're not just doing maintenance on an existing well or existing wells. Is that in conformance with the general plan? Sorry, let me grab the staff report again. But that's how I've kind of thought of it myself in approaching the planning commission in the past. So for example, one of the projects is the Mission Drive East End Bikeway Shoulder Widening Project. That's like a whole new kind of type of project. And that would be to widen Mission Drive from Pine Street down to Alamo Pintado Road, to allow more room for bike lanes and a wider shoulder there.
Isn't that a Caltrans project, though?
It is Caltrans right away, and if I could have my wish, I would get Caltrans to do all the projects in their right of way that the city would like to have done. But generally speaking, Caltrans, when we think of something as a traffic problem or whatever, it's really super minor compared to traffic problems they have all around the state. I mean, just compare San Ynez Valley to Santa Barbara, and then compare Santa Barbara to like LA. So most of the things that we'd like to see happen on the state right of way do not rise to the level where Caltrans is going to spend any money. So these are things that were identified in past in the circulation element of the general plan, or by past city councils, or proposed by staff, and then staff was directed then to put it in the 10-year capital plan. But that's the type of project that's like a whole new project. And on this project, what staff had been recommending is that the city council do a study looking at that project first, and then try to apply for state grant funding to cover the cost. So there's the grant program, the Active Transportation Program. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but it's like the largest state grant program for doing, bicycle, pedestrian, transit, and what they call kind of transformational big projects like this. So the perfect path forward on that would be do a study, have community meetings, get the community input, see what the residents and businesses think about it, and sort of devise the description of what the project would be exactly. Because right now it's just, it's a little fuzzy. And then you could apply for grant funding and try to get state money to do it. But But to just, if we had a well-defined project, even with plans and specs, and we brought them to Caltrans and says, hey, we want you to do this, they won't do it. They, you know, unless there's some major traffic congestion or something that, you know.
I don't think there's any problem with bringing new projects, and everything doesn't have to be a maintenance project, as long as it conforms to the general plan. It's just a matter of what makes sense to do, which is part of what we're supposed to advise the city council on.
I think Matt gave you a great example, and so if you, as the planning commission, in your interpretation of the city's general plan, believe there's something in the general plan that says we should not have bike lanes, then you would bring that up and you would vote, no, that project is not consistent with that particular provision of the general plan. Again, I think you don't have things that are straying in that way, though. And the other thing, you're going to be looking at an update of the general plan within the CIP program period. So I would urge you all, if there are projects that you see that are of interest to you all, that's something also to bring up when you're talking about the general plan updates. You know, if you wish bike lanes were separate from the roadway rather than, for example, being along the roadway. That's something you
Yeah.
can bring up, and that could be an update to the general plan. And then instead of looking at these are class twos?
Yeah, these would be class 2
Yeah,
bike paths.
you'd be looking at class ones.
Yeah, totally separated from the road. If you,
I have a question for you, Matt. Going back to the Caltrans Mission Drive cuts right through, it's like the main road.
Sure.
And sometimes, especially going down, when you leave town past the Mission,
Right.
there's been those potholes there, and they're pretty significant.
right,
And
right.
it takes a while for Caltrans to get out there. Is there a way we can add into the general plan or to talk to Caltrans or something that we can maintain stuff in our roadway? Because, I mean, some of
Yeah,
those
that's-
potholes have turned into like rim
Right,
benders,
right,
so.
right, sure. So, city staff often contact Caltrans directly when the potholes get bad or whatever. But, Caltrans on their website actually does have a, service request function. So any resident, we've tried to, get this information out when people have called, but, so anybody can just go to the Caltrans website, and if you know the approximate location or the near an intersection or whatever, you can actually submit a service request online, right on their website. And that's actually what we found is the fastest and best way to get the service or the problem addressed. And in some cases, if it's something really bad, we have actually gone out with our own staff and thrown some cold mix patch in there on a temporary basis until Caltrans can get out there. But yeah, so we really don't have a lot of control over Caltrans, you know, huge agency.
But why don't we put it on the website or a link at least? Hey, is
That's
there
a
a
good
problem? Why don't we just do that on our website? Because then we can direct our
Yeah,
residents.
That's
Hey,
a great,
here,
that's a
here you
great
go.
idea. We'll do that. We'll add a link to the,
Yeah, because it's good
maintenance
information,
request.
but I wouldn't know that.
Yeah.
So.
Right,
Yeah.
right, sure. Yeah, great.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Okay.
So the action tonight is to adopt a resolution to the city council for adoption of this capital improvement plan and make that recommendation.
Okay, before we do that, I have some recommendations along with what we talked about before with, and so my first question is, or suggestion is that the tree management, why is that in transportation and road improvement as opposed to facilities and parks? It seems like facilities and parks would be a more appropriate. I'm not objecting to the task. I'm just saying where it is doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, that's a great question. The tree management mentioned there is for street tree management. So since that's in the public right-of-way, it's, just like the storm drain system and the sidewalk and curb and gutter and the road, all that's.
So it's only trees along the roads that are covered by this?
Correct. The more routine tree pruning and maintenance of trees within the parks doesn't get onto the capital plan because it's just considered I guess the-
Operational.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, good, that answers that question. And this is just a general question that I have. On the project status for the rebuilding the house that burned up here, project 13.575, it says that a permit was issued, and for an addition, my only question is that addition an ADU, or are they actually adding on to the house?
That particular, Lori Morgan responding to the question, the next unit that is going to go on that site does qualify as an ADU, and that permit has already been issued from the planning department, and the construction plans are being plan checked right now.
Yeah, I saw that. I was just curious what it was. And on the updates, the general plan, I don't know if this is the right time to bring that up. I was looking at that.
Mr. Chair, are you talking about the particular agenda item that is the report to the state?
No, he's talking about the.
I think it's about the special
This-
project, yeah,
this
and
chart.
that's under the,
So I went through this.
actually, that, I believe that chart is the next agenda item, sorry.
Oh, okay, then I'll wait till we get there. Okay, does anybody have any findings on this that say that it doesn't fit within the general plan and that we shouldn't recommend it to the city council for approval?
I just have one quick question. Chip brought up the fact that maybe we should have meetings or something. What were you talking about referring to workshops for the general plan? Are we trying to get this approved so Matt can get this
No,
forward for the future?
No, that's not necessary for your current action. I was just noting that some of the things that are in the capital improvement program now are actually updates to your general plan. That's something that, I think would be of great interest to your planning commission, so you all may want to have, not as part of tonight's resolution, but just for future agenda planning. You may want to have some workshops amongst yourselves to talk about those updates. to
Got it.
the-
It was just a recommendation for the future because these things will probably need community
Right,
input.
and
Got it.
also was mentioning the general plan will really be, general plan hasn't been updated for some elements for, over 15 to 20 years. You really want to generally update the general plan every 10 years, so it's going to be a big, important conversation for the city, and so that's why we want to definitely have experts and consultants working with us and facilitating those larger conversations that are kind of more visioning as to the development for the next, 10 years for the city of Solvang, and that should help us also address some of the other larger projects that are coming to the city as conceptual proposals right now, to where we are talking about, impacts on water, wastewater, traffic, and all of those elements. So that will be a big conversation, and definitely the planning commission and the council would be involved in, along with the community, of course.
And one last question I had about the ADA upgrades that are needed. The ADA changes their rules, as you know, every once in a while. So the stuff that you're putting in now, just make sure it's money well spent, that it's going to be grandfathered in or, stand the test of time at least, or what is there a statute of limitations? Say, hey, we updated this, like, we don't need to update it again for, 20 years, 15 years, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know if our city attorney knows anything more than what I do, but basically, anytime we do make an upgrade, we follow whatever the current guidelines are for that upgrade at that time. And my understanding is that when you do that, you're basically fine for many years as you continue to upgrade other things that have never been upgraded yet. So if something you've upgraded ends up getting, the regulations end up changing down the road, you're fine to leave it as is. Just any new thing has to continually be following the latest standards, so.
I'm going to make a guess here that actually the city will have updated transition plans at some point in the future, and that you'll probably have transition plans for the rest of all of our lives. And we'll be, we'll be transitioning as the rules continue to change.
So, does somebody want to make a motion to approve the staff report and the recommendation to the city council? No?
I will make a motion. I'll make a motion to present, to forward this plan to staff.
You'll be adopting the resolution 2001, which is the resolution to the Planning Commission finding that the capital improvement projects in the capital improvement program for the 10-year fiscal period of 2021 through 2930 are in conformance with the general plan pursuant to Government Code 654101.
That's what I propose.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? No opposed. Approved 4-0.
Thank you very much. And if you any of you have further questions on anything, please don't hesitate to call me or send me an email or whatever, so.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you very much.
If we do have to have a, if we do decide to have a workshop, is that open to the public?
Yeah.
Otherwise, if we all got together, that would be a violation with it. Thank you.
Please don't do that.
I will not.
Thank you.
Okay, on to item 2B. Could we have the staff report, please?
This item is being brought forward to the Planning Commission to educate you on what happens with information that's forwarded on to the Housing and Community Development Department at the state. Annually, a report is filed that documents the permits that have been issued for housing in every jurisdiction in the state of California. In this case, this report needed to be filed by June 1st, 2020. So this report has actually already been heard by the city council, but we thought it was important to bring it forward to you because it includes a number of references to the general plan and action items that are moving forward in order to address housing, and also identifies the kinds of housing that have been approved over the last year. In this case, we reported that there were 8 single-family homes that were permitted. They're not built yet, but permitted, along with 8 accessory dwelling units. And those were the projects over at the cottages at the Meadows, and the site is being prepared right now for those units to go in. The state does allow for us to report not only projects that have been permitted, those that are under construction, and also those that are being planned for through permits that have been submitted. We will be having quite a few more units this year being reported. We've had quite a few applications submitted in the last couple of months. And so every year, we need to document what is happening with our housing. This does, just as a ripple effect, we will be including these numbers in our update to the housing element, and also being reported as part of our, what we call regional housing needs assessment. All of those things are in work this year through reports from the census. Then we see our housing needs assessments, and eventually that all gets rolled into the housing element update that'll be coming. So The report was provided that documents not only the age of all the reports that we currently have, or elements that we currently have, as well as housing element requirements that we've been working on. And I'm available for any questions.
Well, first of all, do we have any public comment on this item?
Is there any public comment on Zoom? If so, raise your hand.
No,
Seems
okay,
like none.
bring it back to the commission. Any comments? Going through it? Questions? Of course I do.
Good.
And so now I'll bring this up. As Zena aptly pointed out, a lot of these elements of the general plan are way past due, well, not way past, but past due to be updated. And I looked at the schedule that's in here, and it seems to me, and I don't know how locked in concrete this is, but it seems to me we missed an opportunity to bring the updates into conformance with a 10-year cycle. And so I've gone through and I marked them up to what would be a 10-year cycle, so that by 2030, everything will be on every one of these would be on a 10-year cycle, and there'd be, I think, no more than 3 that would be in any one year. And also on the last chart, for some reason Parks and Rec, where it was left off, I don't know why, but it's not on there. It's on page, I think, 48.
Yeah. So the schedule that has been brought forward was reflective of what is in the capital improvement plan. And as we go into negotiations with consultants, some of these may be able to be concurrently processed, depending on how we move forward with the contracts. There are a number of items that for small cities, you may see noise, conservation, open space, some of these more environmentally oriented policies put together as a package and done at one time, and could follow when you finish the housing and circulation and land use policies. So you may see those almost ripple right after you get the chunk of the work done through these bigger planning documents. So that's usually why you'll see them happen just a little bit after housing, land use, and circulation, because those are the big driving elements, and then the rest follow suit.
Right, and I'd just like to also add that the 10-year CIP is just a 10-year planning document, but it actually gets revived and looked at with every financial plan development. So, and with every budget. So that's a living document. So if over the next year the city develops and updates the general plan update, which takes a minimum of a year to do, maybe longer, then with the next round of capital improvement program, then staff would be developing recommendations for projects that are in line with, an updated general plan. And that goes through the process of, having either community conversations as well, then coming to the council, staff making recommendations, council prioritizing that, and then you look at it again in conformity with the general plan.
Okay, I just thought we were losing an opportunity here to get things on a regular schedule.
Right.
That, as the city moves forward, it would be plain that certain things have to be done.
Right. So as I mentioned, as the general plan is updated, then staff will revisit and review the capital improvement program again and update the 10-year look to match the general plan.
Okay. And, things like conservation, it's according to this, was it the conservation? Yeah, the conservation open space were just updated 4 years ago, but yet this says we're going to do it again this year.
And it will be as a
Why would we do
result.
it 4 years later when there are things that are over 10 years old that we're not addressing?
Yeah. All of, the goal of putting this all together was that we'd finish the core elements, which is land use, housing, and circulation, get those done, and then all of the other pieces fall behind that. And so we, even though the conservation and open space element was approved recently, 4 years ago, we want to have it consistent with the decisions that are made with the land use, housing, and circulation. So even if it means we just review it to see if it's consistent, or if there are truly updates, we want to make sure that it all is consistent. One of the guiding principles of the state planning's law is that your general plan elements should be consistent internally with each other. And so we need to review it whether we change it or not.
Right. Laura, maybe it's also good to mention that our county is in the next round of updating the arena numbers as well. I don't know if
Right.
we've talked about that.
Yeah, Solvang is one of the cities within Santa Barbara County, along with the county, that needs to meet housing obligations. And regional housing need numbers are currently being reviewed. Numbers come down from the state, and then they're disseminated among all of the different cities in the county. And once we have an assignment of numbers of housing units, we will begin incorporating that into our housing element. And if you can look on page, of the report, our previous RENA numbers allocations, I believe, was 175.
What
It's on
page are you-
it's on the housing element, chapter 3, and I'm sorry, no page numbers on these. We had a number of different categories of housing: very low, low, moderate, and above moderate housing.
It's page
For a total-
51,
Yeah, total
page
of
51.
Oh, sorry.
51, yeah.
For a total of 175 units that were assigned to us with the previous RENA numbers. And we're slowly working our way through that, and the table that was provided on page, and you can help me with this one, this chart table right here, what number that is. Keep going, yeah. The next one.
56.
On page 56, you can see the score sheet of how we've been identifying unit counts over the last couple of years. And so right now, we are at 146 out of the 175 units that have been assigned to us in different categories. And this is the report that the state relies on as they see obligations being met by each jurisdiction.
So just, I hadn't really looked at that chart you're referring to, but, oh, I see. Those are sevens, not question marks on there, right? I was going to ask why are there question marks, but they're sevens. It's just hard to read. Okay.
And people can go online at the Housing and Community Development Office and see every city in the state of California's report and what they've accomplished over the last year and even going back.
Okay, so this is for information only.
This
There's no
was.
action we need to take on this.
Yes.
Anybody else have any questions about it, or need a clarification on anything?
What happens if you don't meet the state's numbers? Is there some negative consequence? So it's like, our number was 176, so we get to 143, what happens?
Well, the state has become, okay, Governor Newsom has made housing one of its highest priorities. And there have been threats of lawsuits, threats of holding back funding. Last year, there was 6 cities targeted for not meeting their obligations in housing, and Pismo Beach was one of them. There's other jurisdictions that were, targeted for not meeting their obligations. Many of them had to go back and rewrite their housing elements and commit to meeting their obligation to provide a wide range of housing for their citizens. So it has become a much more stringent requirement at the state level. So thank you. I hope that
So
helped.
the ADUs, I think, were intended to address the low, very low
Correct.
segment, which doesn't really do the way the state wrote it up, but I think that was their intent.
Actually, it was their intent. The state has recognized that accessory dwelling units can be counted as affordable units because of their size, affordable by design, and the smaller units meeting a certain part of the market that may not already be met. 1 bedrooms or small 2-bedroom unit can provide housing for a family or a single person that could not find housing elsewhere.
Provided they can afford it.
Right. And that's one of the policies that the city of Solvang has, is that in some jurisdictions, ADUs have become, Airbnb-type units. And that's one thing that the city is adamant about, is these are housing units. They're not for visitor use.
Right. And that's part of what we're going to discuss next month, right? With,
Yes, yes. So again, that item was for information purposes. The next item is just a memo that we have been working through the ADU provisions, and with all of the work that we've been doing on a number of other fronts, we have not gotten back to the ADU ordinance, so we'd like to continue that to August. Continuing that one
yeah,
forward.
well, we skipped item 2C.
That,
So item 2C is one of the ones that we actually did get to,
oh, I'm sorry.
in large part because of COVID-related issues, but also there has been, there are a number of things in the zoning ordinance that need to be updated, including provisions that conflict with each other, and then provisions where staff implementation of the sections of the zoning ordinance are not actually consistent with the language of the zoning ordinance. So in looking at the need to provide, especially during this COVID period, for additional outdoor seating areas for restaurants, bars, and wine tasting in the TRC, those are the things that are allowed to occur outdoors in the TRC. Again, only restaurants, bars, and wine tasting, and that's one of the things that we've been trying to clarify for the public. Regular retail sales in the non-COVID period are not permitted. Retail sales, even in the COVID period, it's an issue that is going through further discussion. But it was very clear the council wanted to create the opportunity for additional social distancing even before the governor's latest order. And so we brought forward to the council an urgency ordinance to allow for additional seating, an additional area in the TRC without the requirement for an updated development plan. While we were taking that forward to the council, we also clarified a couple of other provisions related to processing of expansions without the requirement to bring a development plan back to your commission. Typically, anything in the TRC requires development plan approval, and any change to anything that got a development plan requires that come back to your commission for an update to the approved development plan. There was a section that had grown, I would say, through primarily practice over the years, where there was a belief that people could come in every 2 years and get a 300 square foot expansion without new development plan approval. We noted that there actually were two completely inconsistent provisions of the zoning ordinance related to that, so we've clarified that in fact, the 300 square foot exception is a discretionary waiver by the planning director. It's not a by right thing that everybody is entitled to get an extra 300 square feet every 2 years. We also clarified that the 300 square foot exception is for addition, alteration, or replacement to an existing structure. So it's not the creation, for example, of a new 300 square foot building, not related to any existing structure. We also have clarified that you, in fact, must have a development plan before you can do a minor addition or alteration to something that requires a development plan. And then made very clear that this is for restaurants, bars, cocktail lounges, or wine tasting, and that the planning director, in providing the planning director's opportunity for waiver of the development plan process, can be any size if it's an outdoor area. And that the planning director may include in that determination the waiver of requirements for up to 2 parking spaces. So if somebody wants to use their existing parking areas in order to provide additional outdoor space, the planning director can approve the elimination of up to 2 parking spaces. Anything beyond that actually has to go to the city council, in which case the city council under the in lieu fee ordinance can either decide to charge in lieu fees or can waive that requirement for in lieu fees. The changes I just described have been made by the council in an urgency ordinance. We're bringing that back to you and asking if you would like to recommend to the council that they make those changes permanently, and if you identify any other changes in those sections. One of the things the council did talk about in the first application that came to the council for waiver of additional parking spaces was a desire to look at also the provisions in the TRC relating to noise and relating to smoke. And so we'll be coming back to you at some time in the future likely with amendments to those sections of the zoning ordinance as well, to provide for additional control on noise and smoking in the TRC.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. Start with your comment about smoking. There is a...
Actually, I should probably recuse myself from this.
This is, relates to, I believe, more than 10% of the city. It's a general
Okay.
item.
So I'm good?
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're good.
A couple of years ago, the city council passed a smoking ordinance that basically bans smoking in the city of Solvang.
I just would note, the council thought the same thing. There are things in the ordinance that when you say basically ban, basic was a nice concept, and there are some particular things that we're going to bring back to make it very clear that smoking is banned in public spaces and in outdoor patio areas. Again, because of the way the ordinance is written, the first one that came forward, they voluntarily agreed as part of their project description to eliminate all patio smoking, but the city's ordinance does not, in fact, effectively eliminate all patio smoking. It's the same, there is a belief that the city has a noise ordinance that is very controlling. And when you actually look at the noise ordinance, it applies, it doesn't really control much of anything at all. It has a nice name to it, and it doesn't very well function. So we'll be bringing those things back to you.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions, comments, concerns? I have one more question. with respect to the two parking spaces, does the planning director have the authority to waive the in lieu fees for those two spaces?
The planning director does have the authority to waive the in lieu fee, but only for 2 spaces. Again, any more than 2 has to go to the council with a request for waiver of the in lieu fee, or the in lieu fee would be
Right.
charged.
And what is the criteria that the planning director would use to decide that?
Public benefit, including economic benefit to the community. This was one of the things that the council has been looking at, particularly along Mission Drive, the desire to create more activity along Mission Drive. And in those few instances where there are still parking lots where cars have to pull in and out or back across the sidewalk, that's something the council has discussed as not being a desirable layout for the city. Again, we're in the process of doing an update to the parking study and looking for additional opportunities for parking to create, again, more of a non-parking front to businesses between the sidewalk and the business.
I'm just concerned that we may be opening Pandora's box with the first one that's approved. Everybody else is going to say, well, they did it, well, they did it, well, they did, why can't I do it?
Yeah, I would just note, there are a few projects, in particular along Mission Drive, where the approval was actually just at the staff level. So you already had Pandora's box in some ways opened. It's just, again,
Just opening it a little wider.
well, not necessarily. You're actually now amending the zoning ordinance to clarify when that waiver can occur, rather than just leaving it. It appears in at least 2 instances, again, it was, I hate to use the term whim, but we can't find the why planning staff made the decisions they made, and the decisions were inconsistent with the actual language of the zoning ordinance. So that was one of the purposes for tightening it up and then limiting it to no more than 2 spaces without having to actually go to the city council and request a formal waiver of the in lieu fee.
Is there a reason why it's just 2 instead of just, because considering the COVID situation, shouldn't they just waive them all? I mean, because, we all know that businesses right now,
So
they don't have a lot of space, especially with the latest
So
order.
what we have going on right now, and with the idea that the COVID emergency really is an emergency, for the emergency period, the planning director actually can waive all parking requirements and can allow expansion into the entire parking area. But that's only as a temporary action while we're in the city-declared COVID emergency, which will continue while there's a state-declared COVID emergency. What this actually does is allows somebody to come in and get approval of a permanent change. And so even after COVID is done, those who come in and apply for and are granted an
Follow these
approval,
rules.
that's essentially a new change to their development plan.
Okay.
And again, the question for you all is, would you like to recommend that the council make that as a permanent change and a permanent ordinance, or not? And an urgency ordinance lasts for 90 days. So we're in the midst of that 90-day period.
Yeah, that was my next question, because I couldn't find anywhere where it ended. So, comments, thoughts? Nobody?
As a active participant, it certainly is super helpful during this time period.
So what about on Mission Drive? you know, if the spaces are not right on Mission, I can understand you'd like the one that was approved. But for businesses that are on Mission and there's parking spaces right in front of their building, can they come in under the 90-day urgency ordinance and say, hey, I'd like to take those 2 spaces on Mission Drive and put in tables or whatever?
So I think we've got sort of 3 different sets of circumstances, so I'll go through all 3 different sets of circumstances. During the real COVID emergency circumstance, the city is granting encroachment permits, and so the city is allowing people to encroach onto either city-owned sidewalks or city-owned roadways. And that again is for a very short period of time. There is a wonderful encroachment permit process. It's fairly, it's an expedited process, and it largely involves showing what you're going to do and providing the city with an additional named insured certificate. For the 90-day period that we're in, that really only applies if you own the property. So if you own those parking spaces, which again tend to be those which are on the business side of the sidewalk, you can make application, and the planning director can waive the requirement for additional development plan review and grant, again, up to the removal of up to 2 parking spaces. Again, those are, I think, in virtually all circumstances now, they're the parking spaces that are between the sidewalk and the business. Either under that 90-day period or under what we're asking if you want to recommend to the council as a permanent change. In neither of those circumstances would the business owner be able to permanently take over city sidewalk, city roadway, or Caltrans roadway. So those things would all require some additional action. If that was something that you wanted us to look at as a longer-term matter, we can look at that as a longer-term matter.
So expansion into parking spaces between the sidewalk and the business could be permanent.
Yes.
Simply stated, I think it's the right thing to do. It benefits the city, it benefits the business, it benefits the customer. It's a win-win for all, I think.
I agree with that, Scott, because how many situations are there on Mission Drive? I can think of, 3, maybe, maximum? You got Ace Hardware, Solvang Brewing Company, Bebop Burgers, maybe?
And again, it
whatever it is.
has to be basically for food or drink.
Right.
So even in the circumstance of the hardware store, unless it were to convert its use, and if it were to convert its use, you'd be seeing a new development.
I think it's a good idea because it's dangerous too, especially kind of pulling in and out of Solvang Brewing Company on a busy day. People are walking through that sidewalk, and there's a very tight little parking lot. I think it's a very good idea.
One of the ones, if you think about and trying to remember which bakery it's in front of, but
Morrison's. Olson's.
Olson's, where Dana Volk's tasting room is.
Oh, no,
I'm sorry, that's not Olson's, that's,
Olson's is on Mission.
so if you know where the Dana Volk tasting room is, that space has like AstroTurf out in front of it. You can still see the curb cuts where cars used to drive through there. And that's, again, one of the ones that just appears to have happened at the staff level, even though that's not what the ordinance provided for. So the ordinance would now provide clearly that staff can, in fact, make such approvals.
And are those grandfathered in, or are they going to have to come ask for approval under the amnesty program?
I actually haven't looked to see what their development plan says, but I also couldn't find anything that showed that had ever come to the Planning Commission.
Okay. So, somebody want to make a motion to,
Again,
let's get the right,
Yeah, again,
verbiage?
this is a resolution to the city council, Resolution 2002, resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Solvang to the City Council to adopt an ordinance providing for addition or enlargement of outdoor seating, restaurant, bars, wine tasting in the TRZ zone.
Okay, and that's on page 72 of the packet.
Actually, it's on page 71, is the resolution. And it will be, the ordinance
okay.
itself will be adopted by the City Council.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll make the motion. So where do I begin? How do I?
You can just say what she said.
Resolution number
That-
number 20-02.
Yeah, PC resolution number 20-02, resolution for the Planning Commission of the City of Solvang to the City Council to adopt an ordinance providing for an addition to enlargement of outdoor seating for restaurants, bars, and wine tasting in the TRC zone.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Okay, made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, pass 4-0. We don't have to do anything as far as the urgency ordinance, that was just for information.
Right.
And thank you for clarifying that it ends in 90 days, and I wasn't sure of that.
The next item is a memo to the Planning Commission that our work on the ADU ordinance will be continued to the August meeting. Just a number of things happening in the planning department has precluded us from getting back to the discussion that we had in March. The next item is just going through, again, trying to be transparent and provide as much information to the Planning Commission, the number of projects that we're currently working on and where they are in the process. This update was back in May 26th. This will be updated for our next Planning Commission meeting, and we'll keep you informed of how things are progressing with the different projects. There any questions on any of the projects that are in this report?
Some of these projects have been around for a while, but basically nothing's happening. Are they going to drop off of here, or what's?
Well, there's a number of projects that recently had building permits applied for under the category of building permits, or projects that are approved but not constructed. The Atterdag Inn has plans in process. We also have a resubmittal for the Alisal Road project, and the Old Mission Drive three-way lot split is ready for recordation. So we are seeing progress on some of these projects. In application incomplete, we have received response to comments for the Alisal Road project for for Ken Hunter, the 11-unit multifamily project. There's a couple of incomplete ones, and then we also received a new application from Ken Hunter on Elephant Potato Road. And then there's a number of smaller projects that are moving forward or on hold, and those will drop off as we're trying to contact people and say, is this going to become a project or not? And try to keep these up to date.
Okay, what did you say about that one at 1420 Mission? On here it just says there's an incomplete letter sent a little over 2 years ago.
Correct, and I haven't had a chance to check to see if they want to continue with that project.
Okay.
There's a couple of projects that have been completed or are basically in their last stages as far as the permitting goes. Cottages on Old Mission Drive, as reported, the building permits have been issued for both the single-family homes and the ADUs. And you'll see construction throughout the next several months on that project. Clean Slate Wine Bar had several permits. That's over on Atterdag. They're doing some exterior renovations, and also new sign plan was issued for that. The Clock Tower project has been undergoing renovations for a while, And we've had several discussions with them as far as their progress, and they just recently submitted a sign permit for the Winston is what the
The Winston.
will be called. So we're working on that permit also.
So they didn't meet their goal of opening by this weekend.
No, I think they still probably have about 2 weeks to go. Fire department still needs to clear, as well as building department for their final occupancy. But they've come quite a ways. It's
Yeah,
very
and
nice.
I've been watching their work. They've done a nice job. That should be quite an asset for the city.
Right. Also included in the report, Solvang Brewery, where we've talked about that outdoor area. And so we've been working with them on how to get that completed. The windmill and is,
What is the holdup there? I noticed they haven't started anything.
we're in final review of their permit. So it's almost there.
Okay.
We have the windmill project, that's one that we'll need to deal with a development plan on that project. We have met with, or talked about the project with several people, and I think we'll be surprised as how things progress on that project. The Laurel Project has two lots. They have single-family homes on each one of them. They're going to do junior ADUs and also an ADU on each one of them. So it'll be the first one that has the full combination of units on the property. And then we're doing some work with Verizon on some cell towers.
Going back, the windmill, is that the one that was originally going to be a hotel?
The water mill, maybe?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Water wheel?
Yeah, the water wheel. Sorry about that.
So that was originally going to be a hotel with swimming pool up on the,
Yeah, and
But now it's
it
gonna
was
be an office
approved,
building.
yeah, it was approved as, taking that old building and making it a hotel. That development plan has expired, as well as the building permits that they had submitted. Basically, the record is no longer active. Anything that comes forward will need a new development plan.
And there's also new ownership.
okay, so they're working on a development plan
Yes,
for that.
new owners are.
Yeah.
I asked because a lot of people ask me what's happening with the water wheel project. you know.
Right, right.
Sorry, is the Verizon cell tower a new build, or is that tower going on top of another building?
There's several different elements to that. They've submitted some that are within buildings and some that are standalone towers. And they've also asked for some temporary cell service to certain areas because they're testing their system. That would be there for 3 months or 5 months to see
Is
what.
this for their 5G rollout?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So on the future planning process, we have the ADU ordinance and how we're going to proceed with that. We also have the design review, branding committee and sign review. And that will be involving going out to a consultant or revising the ordinance. We're still strategizing on how to move forward with project reviews. Permit tracking system, we are working with a group called Dude Solutions to work with both building and planning so that we are in sync when we issue permits and move forward, public access to that information and making it very seamless, which right
So
now
that's
it's all.
implementation of a new software for all permitting in the city that will then enable people to have self-service and have everything online, electronic.
Going back to the design and sign review, can I have an update? Can we have an update on the BAR, the Board of Architecture Review? Does that still exist? Are they meeting? Has it been dissolved? What is the status?
The BAR no longer exists. There is a new, and I think it's called the
BDC.
BDC. that the council created was going to begin the process of appointing people to the BDC, and then COVID hit. And we've just
Is
been,
BEC an acronym?
BDC is,
Design and
The-
Branding Committee.
Branding and Design Committee.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Branding and design.
BDC.
Whichever comes first.
So the council had already directed us to start moving with that process and start creating the process for filling those positions. But then COVID happened, so that's upcoming.
Thank you.
And then the last project that came out of the budget cycle was also scanning documents within the building and planning department. If you've had an opportunity to go over there, we live with boxes and file cabinets, and it's time to move them into the 21st century. So we'll be working on that throughout the next year. There was one,
Just a question, is that something you're doing internally, or are you shipping these boxes to somebody else to do it?
there's almost a three-step process. Someone needs to go through each file to see what is going to be scanned, because there's duplicates or there's extraneous information in there. So we'll have somebody going through all the files, packaging them, identifying how to tag them. That does get shipped out to a scanning firm, comes back, and then it'll be logged onto the computer through Dude Solutions so that, again, it's accessible to the public so that they don't have to call and get copies of a particular file. They can go online and actually see their building permits or see what's been issued.
That'll be very helpful,
Yes, it would.
having gone through the old process a couple times.
Yeah. The last thing is a clarification on the permit process. We are, as part of this system, the original permits were issued as land use permits. Some, through evolution, they became land use clearances, and the ordinance still says land use permit, so we're going to transition back to land use permit for everything that's issued in the city to be consistent with the ordinance, and we just need to create the forms and the stamps and everything that we're going to use as identifying it as a land use permit. So it's part of, it really doesn't change drastically the end result, it's just what do you call it to be consistent with the ordinance. So that'll be a task that we'll be working on this year.
I would just note, and it means that there actually will be a thing in the file as opposed to right now, or for the last probably 20 years, instead of there being a thing in the file that you could look at and say, there's the land use permit, and it has a, it has a life to it, and if you don't do certain things within that life, it expires. What the city has instead done is had a stamp. And so that's all you got is on permits, you'd look and see if there was a stamp that said land use clearance, and it wouldn't tell you if it expired, it wouldn't tell you a lot of other things. So that should help us with things, keep track of stuff not going on for years and years and years.
So are there any questions on projects? We'll just keep you reporting at the next meeting, how we're going.
Maybe you don't.
So we just didn't have in the packet provided the information on the urban growth boundary, so I just passed out those packets that were adopted by council. And that is the next just informational item on the agenda. Chip, if you want to speak to.
We included in this as an informational item. We thought that this was something important for your planning commission to know about, particularly as you're going to be launching soon into the general plan update or general plan updates. As you all may recall, probably a little over 3 years ago, the council was looking at an amendment to the city's sphere of influence and potential future annexations of properties, particularly to the northeast up the Alamo Pintado area and to the west for expansion of urban uses, in particular potential subdivisions in those areas. And that was something that then the council ended up not moving forward on. That was an item of particular interest in the 2018 city council election. And then coming out of that, there was a group called Save Our Solvang that circulated an initiative for an urban growth boundary. The urban growth boundary does not actually prohibit annexations, but it provides that if property is annexed with a couple of exceptions, that property then cannot be used for urban purposes without going back to a vote of the electorate. They circulated that petition, actually received more than enough signatures to qualify that for the ballot. So that was presented to the city council at its meeting on June the 8th. And again, that was, at least as I understand, something that was fairly consistent with the council's vision in 2018 and 2019. They have now adopted that as the law of the city. And by adopting it in that way, it cannot be changed without going back to a vote of the electorate. So the city does now have an urban growth boundary. The couple of exceptions for development outside of that urban growth boundary, if the city annexes agriculturally zoned land, those lands can continue to be used for purposes that are under the city's agricultural zoning ordinance. And then for, in particular, the area to the west of the city where the concrete batch plant and just past Nielsen's, that's already urbanized. So if that were annexed to the city, the UGB would not apply to that area. And then one of the other probably important exceptions, the city's wastewater treatment plant actually is not inside the city. And so there's a provision the city could annex public works types of facilities, and that would include the wastewater treatment plant. So again, other than those, any urbanization of new areas that were annexed to the city would need to go to a vote of the public. And I think you may have at least one commenter on here. I see Susan Bott, who was one of those very involved with Save Our Solvang, and so she may have some comments.
And Nancy Emerson as well, if you'd like
I
to
didn't
take
see Nancy, yes.
public comment now. It's informational only, but I do believe there may be some public comment.
Does anybody want to speak online? Raise
If you
your
would
hand.
like to speak, raise your hand or just unmute yourself. Susan?
This is Susan.
We can't hear them.
To actually speak, or,
We'll fix the sound in just a second here. Okay, try again. Susan?
yeah, can you hear me now?
No, still can't hear you. Just 1 second.
Oh, mine says I'm unmuted, but. Sorry, I can't.
Wonders of modern technology.
Are we good? Okay, one more time, Susan or Nancy. Nancy, you want to try speaking to us?
Are you able to hear me?
Barely. Can we make it a little louder?
I just wanted to express our appreciation for your bringing this to the Planning Commission, because we know that it's very important for them to be well informed about this as plans are made for placing it within the general plan.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
This is, okay. I wondered, I noticed that in the agenda packet, there was nothing after the previous item. Can we get a copy of the packets that, about the UGB, the packets that went to the planning commission members?
Yes, but it's basically exact replica of what had gone to the council and what was adopted. It's just for their information. So there is no special report that was developed for planning commission. It's just the item that went to the council for adoption.
It's the same staff
I
report
don't-
as the
I don't-
June 8th staff report.
Okay, I should know if I got that or not, but I don't remember.
We will make sure that you do.
I would like to. Thank you very much.
Are there any more speakers? If anybody else would like to speak, just unmute yourself. Looks like none.
Yes, not.
We're talking about Citizens Project or any project?
This specific project.
We're on a specific item right now, which is informational item for Urban Growth Boundary Initiative. It's informational item only to inform the Planning Commission about the urban growth boundary that the council has recently approved.
So the important thing in regards to the urban growth boundary is that it sets a parameter for all of the reports that we were talking about earlier: land use, housing, circulation, and all of the efforts that we will be going forward with will be with the current city boundary, with potential for annexation of just those areas identified through the urban growth boundary. And so as we get these new numbers coming down for arena numbers, those are infill numbers that will be considered as part of the land use element and housing element. Okay, thank you. And the last item that is in your packet is just the schedule for the rest of the year. And we have 1 month that will be dark, and that's in October. And we do see some development projects coming forward towards the end of the year, and we will keep you informed as they are ready to come forward.
Okay. So, discussion, anybody have anything else they want to bring up that want to talk about? Somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second.
Made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
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 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You save this for